Hello, friends. Uncle Marv here with another episode of the IT Business Podcast. This is the show for IT professionals and managed service providers where we help you run your business better, smarter, and hopefully more profitable with real world stories, practical strategies, and maybe a laugh or two along the way. So, this is the Wednesday live show. And as you can see, I don't have a guest scheduled. And the reason why I thought tonight I was going to be at a MSP party at the MSP Expo, which is going to be here next week in Fort Lauderdale. So I had my dates mixed up, but I had a topic that was already on my mind because I will be talking about the expo. So let me tell you a little bit about that. The IT Expo is next week, February 10th through the 12th at the Greater Fort Lauderdale Broward County Convention Center. It's positioned as a business growth conference for MSPs, MSP-focused vendors, and channel partners. It is part of a larger show called the Tech Super Show. It is co-located event, and it brings together the IT Expo, the MSP Expo, the AI, Gen AI, Future of Work, CX, AIoT, and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's one umbrella. There's about 7,000 attendees and 100 or so exhibitors, and it's pretty good. I can confirm that I am going to be a panelist there, participating in the profit pricing and packaging thing there. That is going to be an early session Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. So if you are there, look for us. That is in the MSP Expo business track. And it's under the new economics of MSP and vendor growth that is brought to us by the MSP Association of America. So that is that. Another reason that I wasn't planning stuff, this week is Right of Boom. So I already know that a bunch of people probably aren't going to be watching because you're all out in Vegas and you're either attending late night sessions there, dinner, although it's probably only 5 o'clock there. So you're probably finishing up, getting ready to go to a partner dinner, head to a casino or something like that. So a lot of stuff going on. It is turning into conference season. I know a ton of you went out to Vegas, and some of you went out to Vegas and didn't even participate in Right of Boom. So it's going to be an interesting time out there. I, of course, already have conferences scheduled. I've got 3 in the next 4 weeks. So going out to Vegas, at least at this point, was not in the cards. Maybe next year. Let's start with a little bit of news. I haven't done news in a while, so I want to read a couple of stories. These are they're not late breaking, but they're pretty recent. Some of you have heard about at least 1 or 2 of these, but the first one, Fortinet confirmed a critical 0-day that lets attackers bypass FortiCloud single sign-on authentication. And here's the kicker. It's hitting devices that have already been patched for the 2025 December flaws. Attackers are creating rogue admin accounts, enabling VPN access, and exfiltrating firewall configs within seconds, suggesting highly automated attacks. Fortinet temporarily killed FortiCloud SSO globally on January 26 and only re-enabled it for patched versions. So if you manage Fortinet gear, verify your firmware version today, check for unexpected admin accounts, and review your SAML SSO configurations. Folks, this is the 3rd major Fortinet bypass in 2 months. I'm not going to tell you what to do about your firewall strategy, but there you go. Notepad++. I know some of you have heard of that. Security researchers confirmed that the popular text editor Notepad++ had its update infrastructure compromised from June through December of 2025 by Lotus Blossom, a Chinese state-sponsored APT group. Attackers hijacked the hosting provider, redirected the update traffic, and delivered a custom backdoor called Chrysalis to targeted users, primarily in telecom, finance, and government in Southeast Asia. So hopefully we're okay. But the attack was highly selective, not mass distributed for MSPs. This is a wake-up call about software supply chain risk. Even trusted, widely used tools can become attack vectors. Next story, OpenClaw. If your clients are experimenting with this autonomous AI agents, here's a cautionary tale. Security researchers found over 1,000 instances of OpenClaw. Now, this was formerly called Clawbot and Multibot, the popular AI agent framework running with publicly accessible control interfaces and no authentication. The model exposed endpoints that had leaked API keys, OAuth tokens, private conversation histories, and allowed direct command execution. This isn't just a single vulnerability, it's a systemic deployment problem where AI tools ship with insecure defaults. And last, Microsoft Defender adds protection, adds threat protection. Microsoft announced a public preview of threat protection specifically for AI agents built with its Foundry program. As part of Defender for AI services, the new capability covers development through runtime, addressing threats like prompt injection, sensitive data exposure, and credential theft aligned with OWASP guidelines for LMM and agentic AI systems. This follows Microsoft's broader Agent 365 push and signals that AI workload security is becoming table stakes. And I will have links to all of those stories coming up in the show notes, so you will see those. And let's see here. I'm not going to be doing a top 10 tonight, but I will be giving you what some of you have missed, your Florida man stories. And I will have a link to this, but in general, authorities say an Airbnb host at a Disney area vacation community near Orlando was arrested after guests reported he was partly nude and engaging in what deputies describe as a sexual performance with a vacuum cleaner in a common hallway at Windsor Resorts. So this actually happened back on January 21st. There was a whole bunch of hubbub. On January 27th is when deputies moved in and arrested the man, charging him with exposure of sexual organs, which is a first-degree misdemeanor under Florida law. So the original report, like I said, will be in the show notes. There you go. You have your Florida man story for this week. And let's go ahead and thank some sponsors here. Our show tonight is presented by ThreatLocker, the zero trust security platform built for MSPs who are tired of chasing alerts and praying their AV catches everything. ThreatLocker flips the script with default, deny, allow by exception controls. Ring fencing, storage and network control, and even managed detection and response to stop ransomware and other unknown threats before they ever touch your client's data. If you want to lock down endpoints, tighten your stack, and actually sleep at night, check out ThreatLocker, Protect, and more. We are in the midst of changing sponsorships here for 2026. A new category, technology sponsor, coming back is NetAlly. The handheld network testing tools that help MSPs see what's really happening on the wire and over the air in seconds. With auto tests, Link Live, and gear like the Etherscope, Link Runner, and AirCheck, your junior tech can walk on site and troubleshoot like a seasoned pro. And Windstream is now a technology partner. OneStream from BVoIP, the voice and Teams integration platform built for MSPs. OneStream ties your calls into your PSA, associates them with the right company and contact, and helps your team jump right into tickets, tasks, and follow ups without hunting for the info. And we are still securing spots here. Of course, our partners from 2025, Lion Guard, True Grid, and Designer Ready, and our patrons that are giving through the uh, donation platform. If you want to do that, you can head over to the website and do so. Tom, Jared, Jason, and Jason, we thank you guys for your continued support. All right. And tonight's topic, if you saw the thumbnail that I put up, I think entitled that properly. Um, sorry, I'm waiting for my screen to refresh here because see that there. I am out of sorts. I won't tell you what happened with a client, but it was fun today. So basically, I've been working on these pricing topics for a while. I had, if you remember, I had started a couple of shows in 2025 where people had asked me to describe my pricing, and I kind of talked about it because my pricing is a little different than a lot of people's. I don't bill solely by device or solely by user. I have pretty much a combo thing where I bill per a lot of different things, location, network, server, computer, and user. And then I actually bill out everything separately when it comes to the backup storage, secure remote access, all of that. But ahead of my talk that I'll be doing in the IT Expo next week, where we're going to be talking about pricing, packaging, and profitability, this story has actually been sitting here for a while, and I'll give you the link to what inspired me to do this. It's actually a YouTube that talks about UPS cutting Amazon, and there's been a lot of talk about that. And so a lot of what this video did was talk about some things that I actually felt like I did back in 2017 when I got rid of what at the time we thought was my largest client. But I went back and reviewed all of the invoices and QuickBook reports and stuff. They actually weren't my largest, they were my second largest. But I did a lot of what was in here. And for those of you that do not know what is happening, so UPS is deliberately cutting Amazon volume over 7 years to escape their low margin, high cost work and improve their profit per package, even at the cost of total revenue and a short term stock hit. So, what they did was they shifted focus from more packages to better packages. So, they're large, profitable business and specialty deliveries that actually provide margin discipline, and they're saying no to the powerful low margin customers that can make the company uh, weaker over long term. So, to analyze the summary, starting around 2021, UPS began quietly reducing Amazon's volume, even as e commerce grew, because Amazon shipments were small residential orders with high last mile costs and thin margins. Now, by 2025, Amazon was roughly 25% of UPS's package volume, but only about 11.8% of revenue. So there was a big discrepancy, basically margin diluting in UPS's terms. So they chose to cut 50%. So what this did was allowed UPS to cut facilities, trucks. They did cut about 20,000 jobs, but it reduced billions in costs while increasing revenue per package. And their operating revenue went from about 8.9% to roughly 10%, despite, I think it was their net revenue that did that, operating margin, despite their lower revenue. So less money, but more profit. Excuse me. So if you remember the history, FedEx had done this earlier where they walked away from Amazon and then they returned later to only provide large profitable parcels, just like UPS is doing now. So both of these are showing that you can keep the good business while shedding the bad business. Now, Amazon, they are building their own delivery network, giving it power to squeeze carriers and kind of forcing UPS to specialize in these fewer but lucrative deliveries rather than choose the low margin scale. So it's kind of a, cat and mouse game. So the key takeaways from the story, as I see it, margin beats volume. So the revenue per piece minus the cost per piece, which is the true profit, matters more than how many pieces you handle. So that was a big thing that UPS did. Customer power matters. A giant like Amazon was dictating price and terms, often, turning a low margin or even loss making in the account. We talked about the last mile and complexity profit. It spread them out. It was small, high touch deliveries, which were structurally more expensive than the dense, repeatable routes. If you remember the old days of UPS, they would take a bunch of packages into an office building and they could do a ton of deliveries right there in just a short amount of time. Where going into the residential neighborhoods, sometimes they're dropping off one small package at a house and then they got to go to the other side of the neighborhood. And then the people aren't home or they leave it on the porch and all of that stuff. So they were showing that UPS needed to specialize and it was pivoting towards the segments where it could command better pricing and margins instead of being a generic carrier. So, what does that mean? Because what it comes down to, Amazon is a big boy customer. And I'm sure that Amazon was dictating a lot of terms to them because they were the biggest customer. And the question comes is, do you fire them, if they start to distort your operations and dilute your margins? So the reason that this resonated with me, I did have a customer who, and I did not bring my papers with me, but I'll do this as much by memory as possible. I actually printed out the report so I could tell you. So a customer that I got back in the early 2000s was a small customer. I shouldn't say small. They were 40-ish workstations when I first got them. And that was one office here in Fort Lauderdale. They had two other offices, one in Orlando, one in Tampa. And I think it was 2005, they decided to become one network and get a case management system where they could work off of the same database, which meant that the Orlando and Tampa offices would then become a part of Fort Lauderdale and they'd work as one organization. Before that, they were each running as completely separate offices, running their own case management systems and doing their own stuff. They consolidated that. So I immediately went from a 40 workstations, I think it was 42 or 44, to 100 workstations when you added those two offices. This client also decided to grow and added more offices, and they added a Miami office, a Boca office, a Jacksonville office, and a Tallahassee office. Um, and then actually, right before I left, there was a Fort Myers office as well. So you could tell this was a big deal. I think at the time they had 193 machines across the state that I was managing for them. Now, I wasn't doing this by myself. I did start off with tech. This was a client that we actually went co-managed with. So they had a person in-house full time that was actually doing the desktop work. I still oversaw the networking and I was responsible for contracting, other techs to go to the other offices, or I went if needed to, which is one of the reasons I got to go see App River and Gulfview. They were not far from the Pensacola office that opened up right before. I didn't mention that, but yeah, Pensacola office as well. So this was a pretty big client. And the numbers that I remember is that they were 34% of my revenue. However, they were over 55% of my time. And part of the reason was they were big. I didn't want to lose them. Uh, they knew that I was a big part of their business. And for a while it worked, but it got to the point where they simply got too big in the sense that not that I couldn't handle them, but too big in the sense where they perceived that I needed them more than they needed me. And they would try to cut my margins. They would expect me to be on call 24/7, but yet wanted to pay break fix prices. Um, there was a bunch of stuff that happened. I actually missed two flights where I was supposed to go visit family. One at Christmas, one at summertime for a little family. It wasn't a reunion, but like a little get together and stuff. And I remember I was driving back from West Palm from another client, and I was driving by Boca, and the main partner of this firm had an issue that just couldn't wait. And I had to make a decision. Do I, tell him I would connect with him later, go home, go to the airport, go do my family thing, or do I pull off, go to Boca, take care of him? And to be honest, that was back when I was still pretty dumb. And I'm like, I'm not going to piss off my big client. So I went to Boca and I missed the flight, and the family was not happy. Translation, the wife was not happy. So uh, that happened before 2017. So there were a few other things that happened, but it did get to a point where they just simply felt like I was there for them no matter what, and they could cut my margins. And one of the things that really was the last straw was that there was a point in time where I did a network refresh for them, and I've told this story a few years ago. So if you long-term listeners remember the story, I apologize for repeating it. Newer listeners, this is me letting you know what happened. But uh, around 2000, I think it was 8 or 9, we did a first network refresh where we did, I believe it was 3 or 4 servers. They had a domain controller, file server, they had a SQL server, and then they had one remote server at the time. So we were doing a bunch of those, and they thought it would be in their best interest to ask me to, cut the margin. And I said, well, I cut it a little bit. And then they came back and asked me if I could match the cost of somebody else that wanted to bid on it. It turns out one of the people had a neighbor that worked directly for HP and was willing to give them the equipment at cost. And I mean, it was a substantial amount of money for me to not get margin on that. And back then, I counted on the margin of hardware just as much as I did the service. And I know a lot of people are like, well, you shouldn't really do that. Just sell the hardware, make it up on the service. But back then, that's not the way I worked. It's probably still not the way I work. I still make money on hardware because of all the time it takes to me to procure it, prep it, all that stuff. That's another discussion. Finishing this discussion. So the first time around, I went ahead and said, okay, I'll do it. And luckily, I was able to contact HP, do a deal registration where I still made some money on the hardware. But the biggest thing I learned was that it locked out anybody else from doing a deal with that client. So the first time around, no big deal, got my money, got paid. And then in 2017, we were doing a major lift where we were going to be getting new servers and putting them into a data center at the same time. And they came back at me again and asked me to lower my prices. And I was doing a managed service style pricing at the time. So I was billing them monthly already. I was not billing them for all of my time to go through the network design for this data center. I wasn't billing them for the time that I was traveling with their office manager or her administrator. And I say that knowing that somebody from that client is probably watching and they'll go back and tell everybody, but they've already told people I fired them. But nonetheless, there was a lot of work that went ahead in designing the network, visiting the data centers. I forget we visited, I don't know, 5 or 6 data centers, went back and forth with all of that. Had to talk with the vendors about taking an on-prem network SQL server, moving it into the cloud. I had a big old not Datto backup appliance that was also coming up for end of life. There was a lot of working parts, and they once again asked me to eat my costs. Again, I said there was other stuff, but that was the straw because that was when I sat down and looked at it realistically. What in the world am I doing? And that's where I looked at the numbers and saw that 34% of income, 55 plus percent of time, something's not right. So I made the decision to cut them. And to be honest, it actually worked out pretty good. Wife was scared. I was a little nervous, but I knew that I had opportunity once I didn't have all that time tied up in that client that I could then devote to other clients. And while I don't have the numbers to show you, I can tell you this. It only took me 3 years to literally exceed what I was making with that client. And a lot of that didn't have to go out and get more clients. I just got to spend more time on those clients, made them more profitable to us. And in some cases, I think it was 3 or 4 clients, we literally doubled what we were doing with them. And that made up for a lot of that cost. Now, granted, I was probably not billing what I should have. So being able to bill more, add more value into that, that's what I did. So that's the similarities that I see with what I did with what UPS is doing to Amazon. There are people that just are so afraid to get rid of their big whale, their biggest client. One of my clients way, way, way back was actually a reseller. No, that's not the right word. They were on HSN, let's say that. And HSN was their biggest vendor. And I remember watching her just literally go nuts every time she wanted to put together a package and everything. And it wasn't as bad as the people on Shark Tank. It's not as bad as Walmart, where I hear Walmart just literally forces people to cut their prices, do all of this stuff. But she was in that same boat where she was so busy trying to cut margin to get those orders, and it was driving her nuts. And that was when I got to the point in 2017 where I'm like, you know what? I can't do this. I can't spend that much time at one client and let them think that they have me over a barrel. The other part of that was they had exchange server. That was what I was missing. They had an on-prem exchange server. I believe we were still on wasn't 2010. It was whatever the next one was. But an exchange server with that many users, the storage, the information store was always filling up, and we were deleting mail and doing all this stuff. So much so that every Sunday, and I don't know if you guys remember this with the exchange server, if your information store was too big, it would stop exchange at like 2 a.m. on Sunday morning. So every Sunday morning, I would have to get up, log into the network, and pray that the exchange was still up and running. Otherwise, I had to dismount the store, do something, remount it, restart the server, and then they'd be up and running again. So that was another thing where I did not want to spend every Sunday going through this. And because we had not made a headway on the network refresh, that was just in the back of my mind. I'm sitting here not even paying attention to the comments. Let me see here. Keith writes, my answer to my clients, and people say I'm doing it wrong, to customers that ask for price cuts. Here is how we improved your business outcomes. I actually helped you pay my rates. We actually used the help desk and knock to keep our labor rates down and margins up. Yep. When you have a big operation, you can do that. I, at the time, did not. I did have a full-time tech, and I had, I think, 3 subs, but most of the work was at the local office here in Fort Lauderdale. I did not mention that I was going to that office just about every day, at least 2 to 3 hours minimum each day. So I was on site there, and the tech I had, I remember at the time when we were talking, he thought that I was going to shut down the business and go work for them full time. He was afraid. He was like, I don't, you're there so much. What's going to happen to my job if you do that? And I said, I'm not going to them. But anyway, that's my side of the story. So thank you for indulging me. So what are the takeaways here? So I did do a thing as to how this applies to MSPs. Let's see. So probably the first thing I would say is identify your Amazon clients. So look for clients that are, of course, taking more than their share of the tickets or workload, but are a small share of MRR or profit. Now, the simplest way that you can do that is if you have QuickBooks. So that's what I have. And the way that I did it was I actually printed out a customer summary for the year. And then you can do an extra column next to that where you can ask the report to give you the percentage of that line against the entire column. So you can see this customer's income, here's how much percentage they are. And I would just do that year by year to see where do clients gauge with that. The other thing is to look at the constant low value requests, lots of on-site visits like I did with mine where I was going just about every day, scope creep on projects, heavy after hours demand, frequent escalations, and then, of course, the strong resistance to price adjustments and stack standardization. And I mentioned a way to do that is to run those reports. And if you've got a system in a PSA or whatever where you can literally do project margin, I suggest you do that. You have to, that's why you have to know your labor costs. You have to know the cost of your tools. You have to be able to apply those costs to each and every customer. You can't just simply spread it out evenly. That doesn't work. It's not going to work that way. So you sort by profit, not revenue. And then your Amazon client will literally pop off the page if you have that. Number 2, and this is where I think a lot of us have to struggle with pricing, where we shift from more endpoints equal, revenue, as opposed to getting better margin per endpoint. That was one of the big things that I learned then was, I just didn't pick a price that everybody else was charging around here. I did not chase seat count. Seat count can be messy, which is why I charge per all the different segments that I do, per network, per server, per computer, per user. But look for all of those things if your pricing is under market or if your SLAs are too generous. If you are giving your customers, 1 or 2 hour turnaround, but they're not paying for that, then you might want to adjust that. Tighten up the standard stack enforcement minimums, in terms of if you want to charge a per user or per site minimum, stick to it. Don't let people tell you how to do that. Move away from break fix clients to fully managed all in bundles. So I just sent an email yesterday. So I've got 2 clients that are on what I call legacy plans. where they're paying some older prices, and it's just because they've been with me forever, and they are actually, what's the right word? They are low volume clients. Like, I rarely hear from them. So the fact that I'm charging them a lesser rate doesn't kill me because they're not taking up time. But I did send one uh, a email where I presented them with a new rules package, meaning that our standard stack has been raised, and even though they are a legacy customer, they are going to have to adjust to uh, the new pricing. So, I came up with my standard stack. It is a higher seat price, and there is a refined SLA. So, a lot of people will call and think that, if we pick up, I'm going to help them right away. That may not always be the case. Now, this is a client too that I am prepared that if they decline, well, I'm going to walk away. And if you go through and you look at this and you want to right size a client, you do have to be willing to either downsize the package or walk away from them. Which comes to the next part: be willing to fire or trim a big logo client. And just because they're that large client, if they underpay, if they dictate tools to you, they burn your team. Yes, it'll feel like an Amazon type of situation: high volume, low margin, high stress. Be willing to walk away, either trim the scope, reduce you know, their incentives there, no custom tools, reduce their after hours, uh, whatever you got to do. And definitely no freebies. That, I think, is one of the biggest killers that hurts us, is that, yeah, I'm not going to charge for that. Don't worry about it. Charge for everything. Even if you have to send an invoice and then discount it to zero, show them that there is a value in what you're doing, and don't just wipe it off. So be willing to do all that. Let's see here. Um, the example of the more seats, don't chase seats. I know a lot of MSPs, their whole mantra is just to get more endpoints, more endpoints. And I know that that's one of the questions that if I'm talking to a vendor, first question: how many endpoints you have? Most of I'm not the endpoint guy. I'm not the one chasing to get 1,000 seats because of the style of my business. And I know it's not the MSP way. It's not the millionaire MSP way, but it works for me. So the example that I gave with the big client, when I said they were about 190 seats or whatever, you don't have to do what I did and just simply always raise your clients. But instead of, if you've got a client with 150 seats and you're willing to walk away from them, you could probably fill them or replace them with 340 seat clients that are going to be standardized. They're going to be at a healthier price. You're going to have fewer fires. You're going to have better EBITDA, and you're going to have happier techs. So that's the way I look at it: is I'm not going to go after the big boys just because they're big. I want to go after, good clients that are going to value what we value. Let's see here. So yeah, so that's basically going to mimic, what UPS did, where they're going after fewer but more lucrative deliveries. We as MSPs can position ourselves where we can command a premium. We can work on certain verticals. We can deal with compliance heavy clients or high uptime environments where our expertise is a differentiator. So say no to verticals that always grind you on price and resist your stack. Early in my career, I did a lot of body shops. I walked into a body shop and met somebody to the paint company back in the days where the paint companies was actually paying for the computers and networks that went into the offices. So even though I was servicing the auto body shop, I would send the invoices to the paint company. The paint company would then pay me, and it was a whole mess. But as that model changed in the probably right after the boom, whatever the housing thing in 2008 to 2010, the paint company backed away from paying that. Auto bodies weren't not willing to pay for that, and they were always about the lowest price. They were always about the cheapest gear, and it was just a mess. Um, Keith has commented in the chat. We have a low seat count as well, just high margins. Congratulations, Keith. You the man. Okay, so I think the last thing that I have to say is, oh, going back to the video, there was a thing about last mile where they talked about going into the residential neighborhood versus an office building where that last mile was a price killer for them. So the equivalent of that in an MSP is basically the expensive, messy work. So the constant handling of DIY clients, you always have to handhold them. If you are dealing with unmanaged personal devices, uh, even if you're dealing with, one-off custom integrations that nobody else uses, the customer that's dealing with, a server from, let's say, 2012 that some of you may have, it's time to get them off of that. Those are the last mile things that, eat into the profits. So you reduce by standardizing devices, whether you're doing autopilot, MDM, Action One for patching, or whatever. Limit support to approved platforms early, which means that they're not a part of your package. And if they need support on those, platforms that are not supported, you're going to charge properly for those special cases. It's going to be a premium extra charge. The action idea for that is create a surcharge or special plan for highly distributed microsites or heavy remote home users instead of treating them like normal seats. COVID taught us that, where people were saying, yeah, but I'm working from home, so that shouldn't be as much. You know what? Yes, they're not a normal seat, but you got to treat them a little differently there. So I treat them like a microsite, and I treat them a little differently. So you can do the same with that. And the bottom line is, don't let any one client dictate your business. Just like Amazon can threaten to take volume in-house away from UPS, the single whale client can threaten to leave and win concessions. I wrote that absolutely improperly. But the bottom line is, protect yourself, diversify your client base, keep a clear written set of SOWs and pricing guidelines so that one loud client doesn't set your standard. So whatever you've got to do to make sure that no one single client exceeds a certain percentage of your monthly recurring revenue. I know that the baseline that people say is you never want to have anybody stay above 10 or 15%. I know it's tough. Sometimes we get ones that are in the 20 or 30%. As long as what you give them matches what they give you, that can be fine. But put those guardrails in place, and that will help you deal with growth and negotiation down the road. So those are all my notes on that. I hope that that made sense to everybody. That is not going to be a part of my discussion over at the IT Expo for that pricing and profit package, unless somebody there listens to this and asks. But again, like I said, that was on my mind from last year when we talked about it, and seeing the video from UPS sparked my mind on that. So there we go. All right. That's going to do it for this episode here. I will not be here next week on Wednesday. As I mentioned, I will be at there's an MSP dinner Wednesday night that is happening at the expo. So I will be there Tuesday and Wednesday. But don't worry, you should have seen extra episodes in your feed. In fact, there was one on Monday, Lori Sites, where we talked about culture and internal podcast. There was one today, Rafi Jamdachian. We talked about zero trust. I actually have another one that will be released Friday. Roddy Bergeron from SureWeb joined me to chat about some stuff there. And I'll be honest with you, folks, you need to stay up to date on the podcast. Now, most of the podcasts that I'm doing audio wise, I'm trying to keep to that 20, 30-minute mark so that you guys can listen, get in, get out. The audio, the live shows here, I'm trying to keep it about 45 minutes, a little bit lesser. Roddy and I did not keep to that schedule. We were over an hour chatting, and it's a good discussion. I think one you're going to like. I've got more scheduled. And then, of course, as I mentioned, this is conference season, so there are going to be a lot of podcasts coming out. So I'm going to see you live in 2 weeks. And then I think I have another week off as I will be in Orlando for Zero Trust World and for Channel Pro Defend. So if any of you are going to those events, let me know, and I will see you there. That is going to do it. If you picked up a nugget that can help your MSP or your IT team run better, smarter, or more profitable, share this with a fellow tech and make sure that you've subscribed to us as one of your favorite podcasts in your favorite podcast app. You can find show notes, links to our sponsors and resource mentioned over at itbusinesspodcast.com. And if you want to go a little deeper, connect with me on the social or join the live stream chat on our next broadcast. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for taking time. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your clients. And I'll see you next time. And until then, holla.